Hey guys, what's up? It's coming back to ya with another episode of Walks with Schla. And I guess I'm recently thinking about, I'll just blurt out what I happen to be thinking about this second. Because you happen to catch me at a good time. You happen to catch me at a good time. What great timing. Just like more of my usual thoughts about how, it's not really fair and we're kind of getting robbed as young people right now because there's so many old people retiring and not working and, just like living it up. And then since there's not proportionate enough younger people to replace them, we're struggling and having to sacrifice more than they had to. It's really not fair. So I think what genuinely needs to happen is a redistribution of some of these people's 401ks accounts, starting with the top, slicing them down, and distributing them downwards. I've already talked about having a higher Social Security tax on people from larger population brackets because that really makes more sense. I mean, guess you could make the argument, though, it could be the inverse of that. Like if somebody is from a high population, then their rate would actually be lower. And then, now I'm all like confused because they wouldn't have to pay as much into it to get the same amount out. I'm like all thrown out right now. Thrown off. I'm all thrown off right now. I don't really know. Now I'm like, wow. I wonder what. Because, why am I saying that? Well, the only reason I'm saying in this circumstance, why you have to take some of the money from older people is just because they don't really deserve it. Like, I think that's one of the main things about humanity I want to try to document and tackle and theorize. Just because somebody has something doesn't mean that they deserve it. And I think that's something that is like incredibly inflammatory and potentially even difficult for basically anybody to wrap their heads around. But it's one of the truest statements, and I think it's pretty central to most of what I end up talking about, is just that, wow, that person was like really impatient. They were like really cutting it close and squeezing past. But anyways, I have no idea what all the commotion's about. But it's one of the most, I guess, central principles to a lot of the things I talk about. It's, again, I think for a long time in humanity and probably throughout a lot of different religions and belief systems, there is sort of this idea, and I feel like even the law of attraction might even speak on this or essentially entertain the theory that if somebody has something, like, they deserve it. Like, everybody has what they're supposed to have, and that's fine. And this is just the nature of reality. But this is obviously not the case. I mean, it really doesn't take very long to look around the world and realize that there's definitely certain people who deserve certain things, and a lot of people who have a lot that those things really need to be snatched from and redistributed around. Like, it really doesn't take long as long as you're actually observant to come to that conclusion. It's really not like I don't really know. It really hasn't taken me particularly long to figure it out. And so, well, actually, I guess maybe it has, because I think I believed some of those ideas as well, but I think that's another issue with the law of attraction, is it perpetuates that idea, which is not really, don't really think it's based on much, or it's that great of a concept, honestly. I don't know. It's just not really a good thing. So just want to, yeah, it's just such an interesting that, like, what people have they deserve and stuff. Like, actually, no. I actually think most people should not be entitled to what they have, and they probably don't deserve what they have any more than a lot of other people. It's usually a bunch of random events. And I guess what I'm outlining here is probably quite heretical, because what if really our purpose is to try to fix things? What if it's not that this is God's order and this is just how things are supposed to be? What if God created us and he wanted us to perfect and to fix the inequities that exist? Because it's kind of confusing. I mean, if you're going to make the argument that the reality in front of us in this material incarnate world is God's will, and that's all there is to it, I think it raises a lot of questions. It raises questions like, so does God not want us to be developed? Does God not want things to be equal? See, it starts to seem very twisted. I think God would really agree with most of the ideas of my domestication theory, my modernization theory. It has led to a superior manifestation of humanity, at least up until a point. Now we're starting to see where things are not doing well anymore, and I think most of that has to do with the powers that be. I don't know if meddling is the accurate term or what's really trying to go on, but I just think it's so interesting to think about, because what I talk about, I think in particular some people would object to, due to, again, that idea that everything happens for a purpose, and that, like, the events that happen, it's God's will, and it's all part of God's plan. I almost think it seems irresponsible. You know, like, I think on this world, God probably wants us as a group, as a species, to be the best that we could be. I don't see how God would want destruction. It seems very strange to me. It seems very odd. But I guess as I'm thinking about this, it would obviously reduce my stress a lot, I guess, if I viewed things that way, that this is an incomplete world and it's supposed to be incomplete, and at some point I would see, like, a greater manifestation anyway. So all my efforts to try to think of systems or solutions, it's all for, maybe it's all for nothing. I don't know, because like I said, a lot of my thing about justice, it's not overly present. Like, I don't know. It's not overly, like, obvious. I don't know. And I've mentioned this sort of recently as well when thinking about the afterlife. I guess I don't have as much faith as I should that in the end of the day there is something more to what is in front of us. And I guess that is what causes so much of my interest in things. But I think the reason why that's the case is because, I guess in my opinion, it's unproductive and or limiting to believe that, oh, well, this world's broken anyway. Oh, this world's messed up anyway. We're just going to go to heaven, or vice versa. You know, it's no big deal. Like, yeah, things aren't perfect, but it is what it is, you know. Everything's fine. There's the better. And it's like, here's the problem with that, though. If I'm trying hard to fix things here, you know, God would see that. God would see that, and then if there is an afterlife, there would be a reward for such. I guess I view consciousness as a continuation, and, you know, in that case, I don't know that I believe in death, because if there's no reason to believe in death, there's no, I'm getting a lot of things trying to, I don't believe in death because in any form of belief, there's no reason to believe in death. So belief in death is, it's a fallacy. It's because it's never gonna, you're never gonna be confronted with it. You, as a soul, as an incarnate soul with consciousness, will never experience death. Because if I died right now, and the atheist worldview is true, nothing would matter. I mean, I wouldn't have any memory of anything. I wouldn't really know the difference. Like, you can't experience death because you're dead, right? But of course, if you're of basically any religion that believes in an afterlife, then you also don't die because I assume your consciousness like continues as you rise to heaven, or I guess in reincarnation it doesn't continue, but yeah, I guess but at least temporarily, I've never really looked too far into reincarnation, but if that's true, I'm assuming there's at least a brief, like, you die and you're not just like immediately thrust in and born into a new life. I guess that's possible. But in my random theorizing right now, we're assuming that under reincarnation, like, you still have this brief period where as some kind of ascendant celestial body, you see, I'm trying to think, you do like see things, and you see things in an intermediary state. So you really don't know death. Nobody's ever going to know death. Nobody knows what death feels like. You would never know it. If, like I said, if I died, I wouldn't know that. And so that's one possibility or one worldview. But then the other worldview is that there's an afterlife, right? So either way, we know for a fact that death doesn't exist. It just doesn't. You're never gonna feel it. You're never gonna know that you're dead. Well, yeah. Okay, you might know that you're dead, but you're not gonna be dead. You're never gonna be dead. Nobody is dead. It's just either you will die, or you have died and you will see that, but you will never be dead. Nobody can be dead. It's just impossible, because with death comes a lack of being. Your being is no longer. You cannot be dead in the present. So I think it's a very interesting thing to think about as people fear it. You can't be afraid of that which you can't be. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. You can't be afraid of something that doesn't occur. That doesn't happen. And so, yeah, I have no idea why this even, I don't even remember how we got here. But it's an interesting conversation, and time went by fairly quickly, so I'm grateful to whatever entity came over me for this conversation. Oh yeah, so that's why I don't think the afterlife, I don't personally think it's conducive to think about the afterlife, and that's why, because if I'm doing good materially, if you're doing the right thing materially, it won't end up mattering. That's my whole point. Because right here, right now, whether you're good or bad, should determine your outcome later on. And that means that it actually does matter. And I think, in my opinion, and again, I know this is probably heretical, but I'd be curious to see what GPT thinks. There's a lot. I didn't paste my previous thing into GPT, but there's a lot of, even in my previous chat, just to try to theorize and think about that if most Christians, it's either an incorrect interpretation or a poorly interpreted one, if that makes any sense. So I do think that it could be, even though what I'm saying could be heretical, I just don't get it. And I think I've felt that way for most of my life at this point. I mean, obviously when I was a child, I thought about heaven and I thought about all that. But then I thought about it less as basically the second I became a teenager. It was different. There's a different, for some reason, I was always just thinking about the present. And I just see that now as sort of like a indication of, what is, right? And that is what the truth is that even if you believe in an afterlife, it doesn't really matter, because it's what you should be concerned about is the present anyway. So I just think it's a super interesting, because again, I feel like a lot of people, they don't really worry and they don't really care about injustices or problems. And it's a result of that kind of oh, well, it's okay if we don't do much to change things now, or if we don't do the right thing now, because when we die, we'll go to heaven anyway. And it's no big deal, just and that's just my impression. That's just my impression of what happens. I don't know if that's correct or not, because again, I wouldn't say I'm particularly well read on the subject, but that appears to be the most suitable logic. Is that, again, regardless, doing good always makes the most sense, and that even a nihilist, well, no, I mean, obviously, I guess, yeah, if there really isn't a God or an afterlife, then I guess the powerful should just exploit while they can, because I don't really know why you wouldn't do that. So that's probably why they do that, because they probably just don't believe that there is a, because I don't know why else you would. If you think that there's a higher power that exists, I don't know why you would do that. That just seems kind of silly or ridiculous. You wouldn't hoard wealth, or you wouldn't do any of that stuff. Unless, again, like I said, there's probably some kind of twisted perspective. But again, GPT always tells me you shouldn't over rationalize the elites, because oftentimes it is just greed, like for greed's sake. But I still like would have to think that they do have some kind of justification for what they do. And my whole theory is the posthuman theory, which is that they probably believe that people are going to have to die and AI will take jobs, and there's just going to be a lot of people that die, and that somehow would justify what they're doing, because it's like you're basically getting rid of bad people, and in this case not bad people per se, but inadequate people or inefficient people. And it's not something I'm really too sure about my opinion on, because it's painful, you know, and humans have feelings, and I love people and all that stuff, but then at the same time we talk about how feeble and frivolous human memory and care can be. So in that sense, it's like if a person can't conceive care, how do you quantify that, and how do you quantify their feelings? So I assume that's what the elites think. I assume the elites figure that God is going to have some kind of mercy on them because they're seeking to bring and usher in like an era of better people. I don't really know, and I'm still not really sure what my stance is on it, because it's a dangerous stance either way. I obviously don't want to be like directly supporting something like that, because it's iffy. It's morally iffy, and I don't know if it's actually for the better or not. There's a lot of complicated things to get into. I mean, potentially there could be enough money for everybody. We probably could find a system where you don't need to purge anybody. You know what I'm saying? So it could just be a greed thing. I'm just saying, if I were an elite and if I was doing this stuff, I don't know why I would be doing it unless I had some kind of deranged like proof for some. I'm trying to think where they're coming from, but I guess it's possible that GPT is right, where maybe they don't even conceptually understand what they're doing, and I'm basically articulating what the meaning would be, what the meaning most likely is. Like, even if they're not consciously aware of what they're doing or trying to do. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know. I feel like that's what I'm trying to say. Like, maybe I'm actually better at the comprehension of what they're doing. Like, it's crazy. Isn't that crazy? I just don't know. I don't know what else the answer to that would be. But, you know, what I do know is that it's been schla, and now it's time to buy schla. So, see you, schla.